Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Infinity Workforce Solutions Fast Forward webinar series. My name's Steve Kessler, and I'm going to host the program today. We have a very interesting topic today. We're going to talk about breaking down sexual harassment training and probably talk about harassment and discrimination in general. I have to say, having been around this business for quite a long time, we used to not think too much about this kind of training in the transportation and trucking industry. But as our guest Keith and I have talked about, times have changed, and it's pretty important to make sure you understand what this is all about and make sure that you're doing the proper training for your folks. So why don't you all jump on the chat, let us know who you are, where you're from, maybe the company you're with, so we can get to know who's here. I see we have some of our good customers here. Thank you all for doing that. And while you all are working on the chat, I'm going to introduce you to our guest today. Some of you, if you've been on our webinars in the past, have come to know Keith Long, goes by the Transportation Nerd. Keith is a commercial transportation subject matter expert. He's a transportation content creator, a training programs manager, and an SOP developer. He's an experienced safety training classroom instructor and a post-incident trainer. Keith's also a former certified commercial examiner for the state of Iowa. So welcome, Keith. Glad to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Steve.
Appreciate you joining us. I'm looking forward to what you have to tell us. So why don't you jump on in and help us understand this business about harassment and discrimination.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I mean, for starters, you hit it on the head, right? This is in this industry not typically something in the past that we've put as a forward focus for training, right? We typically think about transportation training as transportation-related skills. Your backing, your driving, your pre-trip inspection, proficiency with hours of service, and DOT compliance, right? But when you get into the other things that need to be a focus, this sexual harassment training, which we'll call it for now, but we'll get to further into that topic in a minute, really is just as much, or should be just as much a part of your training as anything else is. So we're going to talk, I guess, all about this ever more common staple training. While some states have not gotten on board yet, it is important to realize that you should. That is whether you're in transportation or in another industry, this should be a staple of your training. So what the EEOC tells us, or Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and that's federal, is that employees have the right to work in a harassment and discrimination-free work environment. Now, it is the duty of the employer to ensure that this holds true. However, it is the collective effort of all the employees that support and create that environment. And that's, your internal employees, your office employees, as well as your drivers who are operating as the public face of your company. However, as you begin to navigate these waters, or if you're navigating these waters already, you know that regulations are constantly changing. More and more training is often required. So without a training roadmap, employees and employers might not know how to help foster that safe environment. So we're going to cover a handful of topics today and get as close as we can to a deep dive on this subject of harassment and discrimination prevention training. And that's kind of what we're going to lean towards calling it. We're going to get away from the term sexual harassment training because we're just scratching the surface there. So first, we're going to talk about some of the common questions surrounding training of this nature, the benefits to you as a company, and the benefits to your employees, what you're risking if you don't have this type of training. Of course, what a proper training should contain, then state, local, and federal requirements, and kind of where you can find those and what you need to stick to and what a lot of those entail. But beyond that, we're also going to talk about delivering training and how to deliver training. So first off, let's start out with that. Let's start out with why. So when it comes to this type of training, for many, the question can be, why should you have an anti-harassment or sexual harassment prevention training program? Why should I provide this training if I operate in one of the 23 states, hear that, one of the 23 states that do not require anti-harassment or sexual harassment training? Why, as a small business owner, should you provide this type of training? Or maybe you don't fall into the whys. Maybe as a business owner or employee, you fall into the what, right? What type of employee or what type of training should I provide? What needs to be included in this training? What are the general legal requirements? And of course, what are the consequences of not providing this training? As I mentioned a minute ago, there are 23 states that do not yet require this type of training. So wherever it is you stand, I'm going to attempt to answer some of these so that hopefully by the end of this webinar, you're ready to make an informed decision, or you at least feel like you have some sort of a roadmap and a direction to go. So initially, while legal is often the focus here, there are many other important things left on the table when you don't provide anti-harassment and discrimination prevention training. So let's start with numbers. See 36% here on the screen. That is 36% of diverse workforces. That is workforces with a diverse employee group, different backgrounds, right? See a 36% higher likelihood of financially outperforming their peers. It's important to note here that this type of training includes diversity. As we talk about protected classes, protected characteristics. 50% of companies who create an environment where employees feel psychologically safe, that's typically by means of training, awareness, and policy, see an exact return, 50% more productivity. Right? So when employees feel psychologically safe, that means that I'm feeling safe to come to work, be myself, contribute information, contribute ideas, share amongst my coworkers, and I don't feel like I'm going to be oppressed or treated unfairly simply for who I am or what I'm bringing to the table, right?
Yeah.
75% and 85%. So 75% of women and 85% of men feel safer at work following anti-harassment training. And this often leads to lower absenteeism, right? And I think that ties directly back into that psychological safety. If I feel like my employer wants to ensure the best for me, then I'm going to feel safe going to work, right? So a lot of these tie together. But that's just the numbers, right? So let's get away from what's in it for you, right? So it's not just about your bottom line. The important focus here is creating that work environment where all employees feel safe. As a matter of fact, the EEOC says that workers in the United States have 5 basic rights when it comes to employment. So per the EEOC, employees have the right to work in a place that is free of discrimination and harassment. They have the right to complain about discrimination. They have the right to request workplace changes for things like religion, disability, medical conditions, pregnancy, childbirth. Additionally, they have the right to keep their medical information private. Now, while HIPAA doesn't necessarily fall into this type of training, we can begin to see the roadmap that the EEOC has laid out here in front of us as a guidance for what should be included in your training. And before we get too much further, let's address the problem with this naming convention of sexual harassment. Hopefully you can already see that beginning to happen.
Hey, Keith, just to interrupt you for just a second, the topics you were just talking about, obviously a lot of this could impact obviously turnover in a company, but also your recruiting efforts. I mean, do companies that really embrace this, is this a recruiting message that they pronounce that they follow all these rules and regulations? I'm just curious if there's any data on that.
So not so much directly in that sense, but I'll tell you where this reaches into on the recruiting end is that when you look at hiring language, right, that's something that as a manager that's included in this type of training, because there's training for manager level employees. So when you look at hiring language, oddly enough, there's a lot of things that we've been doing over the years that we just accept as the norm, but times change, and it's important that we change along with them. So an easy one here to talk about is gender specific terms in hiring practices, right? So when we say mailman, salesman, right, waitress, hostess, those type of terms often deter potential applicants. And I forget the statistic here. I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it's some odd 65% higher application rate when you change your verbiage to, non-gender specific. So that postal worker or server, in the restaurant case. So it's amazing how far this reaches, not just from the day-to-day interaction of employees, but also those that would be coming into your company, because those employees have rights too. That actually goes further there, is that you also have to protect the rights of those that are applying for your company, right? Those that have taken interest and began to engage with you. Yeah.
That's why I can see how important this is, because without knowledge, you may, without any intent, walk into something that could cause a big problem.
Absolutely. And, as a manager, and I think I've got that somewhere in here too, you are responsible, right, for how you contribute to, or individuals can be held responsible for how they contribute to harassment, either intentional or negligently. So when it comes down again to the numbers, as an employer, right, when we talk about what happens when we don't embrace this type of training. So when we focus on, or we're going to focus on the financial risks here initially. So the EEOC has limitations on settlement amounts when it comes to cases filed with them for workplace harassment or discrimination charges. The court systems do not, though. So, well, as you can see here, for varying levels of employment, there are set amounts or limits for compensatory returns, to plaintiffs. However, outside of the EEOC, awards fall into the $40,000 to $200,000 range. However, one of the highest was $380 million, right? And that was just in 2018.
Well, another thing that pops into my mind, Keith, and I'm sorry I'm interrupting you here, but
no.
There's also kind of a cost associated with bad publicity, and word gets out about these kind of claims against the company. It seems like it's hard to put a dollar amount on that, but there are other unseen or recognize costs here too, I would think.
Yep, absolutely. Right. If you think about the damage that it does to your company by limiting the amount of people that are going to apply, the potential downturn in, employee job satisfaction overall, when they don't feel like their needs are being met, when they don't feel psychologically safe, we start to see, application amounts go down, but we also start to see turnover rise. We start to see, people seeking better employment. And especially in this day and age, people want to work somewhere where they feel safe. People want to work somewhere where they feel heard, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So additionally, it's important to remember, said here, that individuals can be held personally and financially liable for their actions in contributing to instances of harassment or discrimination. And that, like I said, either by direct choice or negligence. So a great example of negligence would be not taking action to protect employees when they bring instances of harassment and discrimination to you, but you don't know that you're supposed to do anything about it because your company's not provided training. So you've got a company that's liable and you've got an employee that's liable, right? And that's, so it's important to note here, federal regulations, as we've talked about here, the EEOC protects employees, or says that, employees have the right to work in an environment free of harassment and discrimination. However, from the state side, 23 states don't have an anti-harassment or sexual harassment and discrimination law. So the problem here is that even though your state may say that you don't have to have a training on it, employees are still protected federally. So if you have an incident at work, an employee can file a case with the EEOC and you can still be held liable. So, at its most basic here, but I guess what I want you to take away from this is that it is important that you have policy in place. It is important that you have training in place, because without it, you are leaving yourself open.
Interesting.
Now, again, it should be said here, settlements awarded to victims in cases involving harassment, sexual harassment, discrimination are not something that I'm saying you should mitigate here. I do believe that victims in these cases are absolutely due any and all amounts determined by a final verdict, right? These are serious claims. These are serious things that happen. Not only is this, damaging, I guess you could call it on a company level, but on a personal level for somebody, instances of harassment, sexual harassment can change somebody's life forever. So
I sure can.
It is my belief that companies who seek to provide a work environment free of harassment and discrimination for all employees can avoid having situations in their workplace that would constitute that harassment or discrimination. So, doing the right thing, taking that action, and making sure that you as a company are providing this training, regardless of what your state and local regulations are, is, in my opinion, one of the best things that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, why not? If the training is available, make sure you've done it and provided it for everyone. You've documented it, and you've protected your company a great deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the difference between training and not training is that informed workforces often see less cases of harassment and discrimination. And in most cases, in an informed workforce, they often do not escalate beyond the point of first interaction, because you have employees who know where to go. They know who to talk to. You have a proper policy and reporting structure for deterring and preventing harassment.
Yeah.
And you've got an entire team that supports that culture. So the first step toward eliminating and preventing harassment in your workplace is understanding the prevalence of it. So fact here, while discrimination shouldn't be present in any company, over half, 55% of workers say that they've experienced discrimination at their company. And then according to a report by Glassdoor, 61% of employees have experienced or witnessed discrimination based on age, race, gender, or sexual orientation. all protected characteristics.
I would not have guessed it was that high, but wow, that's an amazing statistic.
Yep. Staggering, right? It
is.
And this is where, like we said, as we started here, it's not something that we typically think about we have to deal with. And often, what we hear most, the assumption that doesn't happen in my workforce, that doesn't happen in the industry that I'm in, or that would never happen at my company. But fact is, it does, and it can.
And those numbers are what's been reported.
Correct. Yeah.
I
Think about how
assume
many
there's a
go
lot of that
unreported.
sort of thing that happens that never gets brought up even by the victim.
Correct. And that can either be right. This and this kind of gets further into what these trainings really should be. But one of the biggest there is fear of retaliation, preventing people from reporting. Right.
Mhm.
As an employer, we have an obligation to protect our employees, which includes protecting them from retaliation, either by the person who, committed the harassing behavior, or internally, right? So there's a lot there that falls into this. So let's talk about training inclusions. Now, while the EEOC lays out that roadmap for what should be included in a harassment and discrimination prevention training, effective and memorable training goes beyond that. So if you set the EEOC requirements as a foundation for your training and then add additional important focuses, you're going to be well on your way to providing value added training. So, for example, here I've got two highlighted. You see bias and workplace bullying. So adding additional training on things that don't necessarily constitute harassment, but could lead to harassment. Workplace bullying, a great example here. While name calling and generally being a jerk is not illegal and does not constitute harassment, if left unchecked, it could escalate to harassment, right? So having training that additionally focuses on factors like this, that we'll call workplace civility, is important because it does seek to foster that environment where employees feel safe at work. And to add to that, you might be surprised to learn that in the past couple of years, legislature in 29 states have submitted an anti-workplace bullying bill. 29 states. So while the face of this is ever changing, right? Like I said, we start with that foundation that the EEOC puts in, and we build on top of that.
Keith, let me ask this, is this activity between employees of the same company? Would this come into play if an employee has done something to a customer or something like that? I mean, or is it just interior to your company and just your own employees?
So it's a fantastic point there. So customers can absolutely file charges against employees. As a matter of fact, that $300 million case from 2018 was the gymnastics instructor. And I don't think we have to go too much further than that to really put into perspective. I think everybody remembers that. But in the adverse, as an employer, I also have to protect my employees from customers, right?
Goes both ways, doesn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely, right? If a longtime customer, Jim, walks in and hits on our receptionist, the answer can't be, well, he's a good paying customer, right? That's not supporting a workplace environment that's free of harassment and discrimination. No, we have to take care of that, and we have to look out for the best interest of our employees. Because if we go back to the costs of this, it may cost you more than that lost business, and may cost somebody emotionally and personally more than your lost business.
The consequences could be much more than revenue lost.
Exactly. So on top of training, any company should have a clear policy, right? So no training would be complete without a strong and informative company policy behind it. So most states where companies are required to provide anti-harassment and discrimination training are also required to provide policy regarding how to report harassment and discrimination in the workplace. A good policy in general should be looked at as a clear pathway to reporting harassment and discrimination. So a statement should say that it applies to every employee at every level of the organization. Nobody is above policy, right? Harassment based on, at a minimum, any legal protected characteristic is prohibited. And as we get into state requirements on our next slide here, we're going to talk about that and how some of those are different from state to state. Policy should be easy to understand, not confusing, right? We should also be available to explain this policy. So a statement that the policy applies to everyone at every level, easy to understand description of the organization's harassment and complaint system, including multiple avenues of reporting. For example, how to report harassment to a director or manager. And additionally, how to report directly to HR. So this can be for a number of reasons, but an important one there to note is that if an employee is being harassed by their direct manager, who do they feel safe to go to?
Right. Having the ability to trust who you're going to go talk to and have a sensitive ear to your issue, I think is really important here.
Absolutely. And that's why, and in my opinion, this falls into safety, right? And transportation, we are all about safety. And this is just another arm of being safe.
Sure is.
So as for what your policy contains outside of a clear way or a clear pathway to reporting, I encourage you to sit down with your HR department and or legal team to determine what items need to be in there. And these can really vary, of course, depending on your industry, your city, your state, and local requirements. So, work with your team, but at the same time, make sure that you're aligning with the regulations per state and federal.
Makes sense.
So this is an ever-growing list, and you'll see two here, Chicago and New York City. So two cities within the states that have additional training requirements. So California, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Maine, and New York all have statutes for when it comes to this type of training, and so do Chicago, New York City. So these can be additional time requirements, how often training should be provided, how soon after hire training should be provided, additional protected characteristics, and even additional state and local reporting resources. Like Connecticut has additional reporting resources. The city of New York City has additional reporting resources for those who work in New York City proper. Same thing with Chicago. Chicago also requires 1 hour of bystander training. Right? Not all states require that. So knowing these things are important. You can find these on the EEOC's website. A quick Google search on what is required in my state. Try to stay away from no-name, search results. Pay attention to things like SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management, or the EEOC. Those are really going to be those guiding lights when it comes down to it on what you need to provide or align with.
That's good information to know where to go to learn about where you are and what's required.
Delivering training. So now for those that are not in the transportation industry, it might be relatively easy to set up, set a group of employees down and get them in front of a computer or get them in front of an instructor and provide this training, right? Provide policy in person, provide training in person. However, in the transportation world, trying to get a training in front of employees like drivers or yard workers or anything like that, from varying schedules to varying locations, it can be like hitting a moving target. So that is why it's ever more common that we start to see training provided on a digital platform. So companies like Infinity make that a lot easier. That way we can put the training into an employee's hands. You said either via the web on a computer or via a mobile app. And then additionally, you're looking at completion tracking and certificates so that you can stay compliant. Because depending on your state, you're going to need these things to stay compliant. You're going to need to keep them with the employee's file. Now, hopefully, knock on wood here, in the next month or two, we'll be able to provide that here with Infinity. Together, myself and Infinity have been working on this specific type of training that will work, regardless of what state you're in, so that you can align with those guidelines and that you can put this training into your employee's pocket. So,
yeah, Keith, it's my understanding. I talked to our head of video production this morning, and they're estimating somewhere between mid-December and mid-January that this content will be ready for the dissemination out to our current customers, and certainly available to anybody that's thinking about getting their hands on it. We can certainly help you do that. As a matter of fact, got a little poll question here. If you have an interest in learning a little bit more about our system and how you can get access to the content, if you can just say yes or no to the poll, we'll be happy to reach out to you and tell you what we have and how you can go about getting access to the content. So leave this up here for a little bit. And all right. Thank you all for that. Wait a little bit longer. Sorry, Keith, I'm interrupting you here.
No, you're good.
Hey, Keith, I got a question while the poll's up there. Would you suggest, I think it would be important that this would be part of a new employee orientation.
Absolutely.
That the training would take place day one. And would you suggest that it would, obviously you want to catch up if there's something you've never done to catch up your other employees, but obviously, would it make sense to be a training that you would repeat annually, or does that make sense?
It does.
Asking.
Yeah. So from an onboarding standpoint, states say, you've got 50 days, you've got 3 months, you've got 6 months, depending on the state you're operating in.
Right.
One of the best things that you can do is start that on day one, right? Where we start out instilling proper company values. And on top of that, we tie that to a person's annual employment date, right? Or their anniversary. So it's easier to keep track of for your compliance team. And then, if you've got something, learning management system like Infinity, why not set an assignment that starts a year out or 2 years out with that training in there, so that when it happens, it's in their classroom and they're ready to go, right? It's a little bit less management or follow up on your end. But I will say, with most states, when providing training on a digital platform, or even providing training in person, you still need to have company policy, right? You still need to have that made available to your employees. So training can only go so far, right? And training, of course, is a requirement in many states right now. But beyond that, be sure that you're also providing clear and concise policy to your employees in their hands, so they know their reporting structure and they know what to do in the event of harassment and discrimination, and they know their rights.
Yeah, we've got a couple of really good comments here, Keith. Kelly's saying they use I guess it's a software called Paylocity, and it includes as part of their usual training schedule. So they're already including that in their training, which is great to hear.
Absolutely.
And Sharon is saying they have anti-harassment training during new hire orientation and annually during open enrollment meetings. So I think those are really good suggestions. Thank you all for commenting on that, because I think, everybody can share their ideas, how they've been going about doing it, and make it a regular part of bringing on new people and how you train all your employees.
Absolutely.
Once you have the information, it's not that difficult to get it out to everybody.
That's correct. And it's, like I said in the beginning, and I've said multiple times through this, it comes down to providing that environment where employees feel safe at work. It comes down to safety. Like the number said before there, 75 and 85% feel safer at work after this type of training, right? So lower turnover, more applicants, better applicants. We talk about diversity. A diversified workforce is overall brings better ideas to the table. Is more profitable when it comes to the company's bottom line, but you really do start to build psychological safety in and of your work environment. And that's really what we should all be going to work to, right? Nobody should have to get up in the morning and fear the place that they're going into or clocking into, right?
Work has enough of its own challenges to add something like that in on top of it. So, and I can't imagine you get the kind of productivity out of an employee if they're living with that sort of thing hanging over their head, or the dread of, like you said, of going to work.
Right.
We have another comment here real quick. I don't want to ignore our guests out there. John has said they have a policy in their employee handbook and then do the training upon hire and annually through their general employee LMS. So I think that's exactly the kind of procedure that we would like everybody to embrace.
Correct. And there is nothing wrong with, if you operate in multiple states, some states say every 2 years, some say every year. There is nothing wrong with doing it every year, regardless of the states you operate in. You just want to be sure that you are adhering to state-specific policies for where your employees operate out of as a home location, right? So if I've got that Chicago employee, if I've got that California employee, I need to be sure that the training is fitting to that location.
Absolutely.
So
very good.
Resources here, like I said before, the Society for Human Resource Management, the EEOC, not only when we say lays the roadmap for employee rights, you can also go to their website and search protected characteristics and get a list of characteristics protected by law, as well as additional characteristics protected by state. And then they also have guidelines for how to create an effective company policy and what should be included. OSHA as well. I mean, we've all got an OSHA board where we work. That's a requirement, right? But along with that is employee rights in the workplace, and they as well have a guiding document for these kind of things. So you've got resources out there, whether it's Infinity, whether it's the Transportation Nerd, or whether it's these resources you see here on your screen. Ultimately, again, what it comes down to is being safe and feeling safe.
Fantastic information, Keith. There was one other comment. Somebody said they are also adding DEI specific training as an annual requirement. So seems like we've got some folks that have joined us here that see the importance of this topic, and I'm hoping that the other folks that have joined us realize that it's pretty important to add this as part of how you train on board and keep your employees.
Correct. And yeah, DEI, for anybody that's not familiar, diversity, equity, and inclusion is becoming an ever more common term in the workplace, and that's a very positive thing.
Yep, that's good to hear. Great to hear. If anybody else has questions or anything out there for Keith, feel free to type them in the chat, or Keith, I hope it was okay. I put your email up here on the screen.
Absolutely.
So if you have a question, Keith is very much an expert about this, or you can reach out to me at my email there, and I'll, if I don't know the answer, I'll certainly know who to go to get the answer. But Keith, thank you very much. It's been one of the more informative programs we've had in a while, and I think it's was a very important topic, and I'm hoping we've kind of opened some eyes up here and make sure that people are aware of this and paying attention and doing the right thing.
Yep, absolutely. Again, thanks for having me. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and I hope that everybody listening shares that as a common core value. So thanks again, Steve.
Keith, thank you all very much. I don't see any other questions here. So thank you all for attending the webinar today. We appreciate you taking some of your time to be here. And watch your inbox on your email for more invitations to webinars that we got coming up in the future. So Keith, once again, thank you, sir, very much. And thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
All right. Bye, everyone.